All right, welcome back to episode 24 of the Precious Metal Gents podcast. I'm Zan here with Brian, and we don't usually do this, but from the inception of the show, we've got Chris at Cardi C Sports Cards here to join us to talk through his new endeavor, the Smarter Collector. And he told me he's going to be on Stacking Slabs next week. So this is the second time I've preemptively struck and grabbed a guest from Brett. So take that, Brett. Hope you learned your lesson. Uh, Chris, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, Zan and Brian. It's good to be here.
So you launched your new website, The Smarter Collector, pretty recently, within the past couple of weeks, and it's new to everyone out there. But I know you've been working on it for a long time, and tell us kind of a little bit about, first of all, what it is for people that are listening that are unfamiliar with it, and then sort of how the idea came to you and how you got started on it.
Yeah, so first and foremost, the Smarter Collector is a platform to educate collectors. Full stop. My goal is to really shorten the learning curve for new collectors and to uh, give experienced collectors some things to think about, different ways to approach their collection, and curate a collection that really resonates with them and that they can look at and get enjoyment out of. I don't know about you guys, but my history in the hobby, it took me a long time to figure out what I liked. And a lot of that was like journey of self discovery, but also journey through what's out there. What's a player's best cards? Why are they their best cards? What attributes of cards resonate with me? I know there's a lot of talk of jersey numbered parallels lately. Like, I don't care about jersey numbered parallels. So why am I going to pay a 2 to 5x multiplier on that? Aesthetics really matters to me. So why am I going to collect the best card of a player that I PC if I don't like the look of it and I pick it up and I don't get any joy from it? So
So
the Smarter Collector is really meant to frame up those questions and those thoughts and put it back on the collector to say, like, hey, what matters to you? Like, don't just follow the herd to buy cards that other people say are good. Like, think about what you like and why you're here and why you're choosing to spend time in this hobby, and like go head first into that. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do at the Smarter Collector.
So did you just start this project on your own, or are you working with anybody on this, Chris?
Yeah, the Smarter Collector is all me. So anytime you see reference to we or us in any of the written content, that's just bad habit that I can't get out of at the moment. But the web design, the graphic design, the player profiles, the collecting guides, it's all me. It's really been a labor of love, but it's been my primary way of like interacting and engaging with the hobby over the last little bit.
You have, you're telling us before, you have a 6-month-old kid, you have a busy job, you're married. And obviously, just from looking at this project, I can see that it's been very time intensive for you. So, it could go one of two ways. One, it could be sort of energizing, and make you want to buy more, collect more, et cetera. Or it could be so depleting that you just don't have any energy left over to think about surfing eBay at night, 9:30 at night. How has
Yeah.
the running the site, creating the site, how has that impacted your collecting experience?
I think I'm casting a wide enough net where I haven't gotten burnt out so far. It's really invigorated me seeing the hobby from different perspectives, exploring different eras. I've written collecting guides on like an intro to pre-war sports cards to like how you should think about your collection in terms of your net worth. So it's really fueled by what I'm thinking about in my own collection in the hobby and when I'm hearing sort of the conversation in Discord and the public square being. So I haven't quite felt that burnout yet, but anyone that comes out with a platform like this or a podcast like yourself, there are some weeks where you have to drag yourself to write the questions, to find the guests and record the podcast. But I know that there is, on the other side, a lot of people that get a lot of value out of this type of content. So I don't take the responsibility lightly of being consistent and being a resource for collectors out there.
So I know when I start exploring like a different avenue of collecting, or even if I just start doing research on like a set or an era or players or whatever, it starts to inspire me to look into other pathways of collecting. Now, obviously, you're dealing with like a huge net of players, teams, and collections out there because you're trying to build this database. Do you ever get sidetracked with this and start wanting to explore collecting other players? Has that inspired you yet, or do you see that happening, or how does that look?
Yeah. So in my personal collecting, I don't know if I've shared this with you guys before, but I'm architecting sort of a custom registry called the 100 Player PC. 25 players from the four major sports, 3 cards of each player. So as I'm going through this, I'm doing all this research for each player profile. And then I do get sidetracked. I'm looking at Ovechkin cards and I'm like, okay, I identified 15 that I think are significant and iconic to Ovechkin collectors in the hockey hobby community. I pick out 5 of my own. Now, what cards do I want to add to my want list for the 100 player PC? So I do have to reel myself back in sometimes because my eyes are bigger than my wallet at this point, and there's a lot of stuff out there I want to collect. But it's really rewarding talking to some of the best player collectors out there to try and inform some of the cards that get onto this list, and hearing about how they think about their collecting and why they've chosen the players that they have. There's really a wide range of why people are in this hobby, which is one of the reasons why I think sports cards is the best hobby in the world.
I think if I were in your spot and I'm going through all these different players, my want list would be growing exponentially, especially because you have it's a big list of players as it is, and
Yeah.
you're only doing 3 cards per player. It must be pretty hard to just want to stick to 3 and not be like, oh, maybe I'll move it to 5.
Yep. Yeah. The 100 player PC is funny. It it spans goats and historical goats and vintage and pre-war to modern and ultra modern, but the only cards I've really bought for it so far are like New England players. So Patriots, Bruins, Red Sox. I'm a Boston guy, so I haven't quite picked up the goat players yet, like a Ruth or a Jordan or a LeBron yet. So we'll see if I have the conviction to consolidate my Boston sports players into one of those goats.
I want to ask you about the kind of the future of the website, but before, just briefly tell me about the 100 player PC and kind of um, what made you interested in exploring that lane of collecting.
Yeah. So I really bounced around to collecting different things when I first got back into the hobby. I was building Allen and Ginter and Gypsy Queen sets. I was buying boxes. I was bindering them up. They were so freaking cool. The like non-sport aspect of Allen and Ginter was fun and quirky. I was uploading breaks to YouTube, really connecting with the community over there. But I am a CPA by trade and a finance professional. And at the end of the year, I'm looking at what I spent and the enjoyment that I got out of it and the value of those cards. And you can buy a full bindered master set of Allen and Ginter for like $65. And I'm looking at my credit card statement saying I just spent $1,000 opening boxes last year. Let's try and like test something else out. So I started collecting Nomar, and then I started chasing an insert base auto set from 2018 Gypsy Queen. And if you check out my Instagram at CardEC Sports Cards, there's a post from a while ago, but it's like a 10 card set called Bases Around the League. It's got a piece of the opening day base used in 2017 for 10 players: Trout, Judge, Goldschmidt, Correa, Benintendi, Rizzo, Chris Bryant, and I think Machado. That's the full set. Great group of players for the time. They were all serial numbered to 10 or 20 cards, or 10 or 20 copies, and I had so much fun chasing that. It took me like 3 years to get the Trout. I missed multiple auctions, serial numbered out of 10, and it was the best feeling when I completed it. The problem was once you complete it, it's over. You're not going to go out and try and get a second copy of everything. And then the 2019 Bases Around the League auto set just wasn't the same quality. So I had looked around like the 20, what was the first year of National Treasures, the Virtuoso set. I think it was 2012 or 2014. Like that signature set is pretty solid, but it's probably out of my price range. I wanted to create something like a set registry, not necessarily tied to PSA, to go chase for myself. So I probably tend to overdo and overthink things. So I came up with the idea of 100 players, 3 cards, because I don't think I could pick a single card for each of those 100 players. And then just started collecting. And I view it as like a lifelong pursuit. If one day I take my collection and trade it in for a really nice, well-registered 1933 Gaudi Ruth, like I will consider that a win. And then you start from scratch. But yeah, that's how I came across the 100 PC. It's been quite the journey to get there.
So I know you contacted me a little while ago. I can't remember when that was, if it was earlier this year or last year. When you started this process, you were asking me personally about like the Aaron Rodgers stuff. And then I remember you mentioning, like what are his iconic cards? And that kind of resonated with me that you were doing this project. You're explaining, I'm working on a project. I'm just kind of building, like significant cards of players so I can make lists. And you kind of told me a little bit about this. So, are you currently doing any more crowdsourcing right now? Are you crowdsourcing for like articles, or like what's your process in building these inventories and talking to other people about them?
Yeah, so to peel back the curtain, I originally had aspirations of creating like the best card list for every player. And I quickly found out that that was a futile exercise. Everyone's going to have a different definition of what the best cards are for a player. And if you try to capture the top 20, 30, 50, 100, like it's going to take you forever. And without an entire team working on it, like you're not going to be able to do it. So instead, I shifted to like what is generally important. If I'm coming in to try to collect a new player, what cards should I know about? And should I add to my watch lists immediately? Because I don't want that interim period of time as I'm ramping up to collect that player. I don't want those cards to come to auction and people to miss them. I don't know if you guys have been in this situation, but if you find a rare card you really want, and then you see, oh shit, the last sale was a month ago or 2 months ago, and then it's 5 years before you see it pop up again. Like I'm trying to take that learning curve and shrink the time so that people don't run into that situation. So to get back to your question, Brian, I start by doing research just like a lot of people do. Go to Card Ladder, take a look at the top sales. I use the showcase feature pretty heavily. I try to find the visible collectors on Instagram and YouTube and reach out, and then just use some of the other research I've done on what is like generally significant from that era. If it's 97 to 99, PMGs, Star Rubies, Platinum Medallions, the Flair Showcases are going to be on the list. You start from there, and then you see, hey, is there anything specific to this player that is worth calling out? There are so many nuances for each player that if I am coming in alone, like unread on the pros and cons of Aaron Rodgers' rookie card years, I'm not going to be able to capture everything I need to and distill information into a way that makes people more confident in collecting Aaron Rodgers. So I reach out to the best collectors out there. Some collectors are more responsive than others. Had a really hard time getting a hold of any Kobe collector, which is a little ironic considering how many of them are out there. But yeah, that's the process for the player profiles, and then right now the collecting guides are just on myself, but I haven't really closed the door on some more expansive collecting guide um, articles quite yet. But just given the time, uh, it's really what do I have capacity to turn around in a week, because we're trying to get a new collecting guide published every Friday.
And so that's a great segue. The website's kind of split into the player profiles and the collecting guides, and so the player profiles are super helpful even if you just want to learn about that player and you don't necessarily collect their stuff. But the collecting guides are even more universal because they feature a variety of topics that all collectors deal with at some point during their collecting journey. I was reading one about good ways to track or inventory your own PC, because like you said, the showcase feature on Card Ladder, I use that, and the physical curation in a way is something that really appeals to me. Have you, since you started the Smarter Collector and looked into different ways to sort of track or inventory, have you changed your own approach at all to your PC and applied some of these things you've learned?
Yeah, not specifically around tracking my collection. However, pretty quickly I realized that I didn't have a strong grasp or thesis around what attributes I valued in cards. Like, I know, Zan, you and I had a conversation about the 99 Nomar Ultra Platinum Medallion. And I was like, yeah, I'm out on that card. I just don't like it. It's easily a top 10 card for Nomar. If I had infinite money, maybe I would go chase it, but I had difficulty articulating why. And as you're going through these player profiles, you have to come up with an explanation and a reason as to why you chose it. And some are easier to point out why they're there than others. In the cards that I cannot come up with a reason for, that's a red flag to me. Like, hey, this probably shouldn't be in my collection if I can't articulate why it's in my collection. I think the best example is I bought a 2000 Essential Credentials Nomar. I hate the design. I hate the 2000 Essential Credentials design, but I bought it because I felt like, oh, I need to complete the run. But I didn't have an ongoing project to complete the entire Essential Credentials run. I should just pick up the 97 and the 98. I like those designs, and then I don't really care for any of the other ones. But I think there's general guidance and sort of group think that says, hey, Essential Credentials are good. You should go collect them, period. We need to stop and say, like, why are we doing that? Are we collecting that because we enjoy it, or because we feel obligated to go pick up this card and add it to our collection? Unless like you get joy stealing a line from Marie Kondo about like bringing this card into your home and into your PC, like, don't buy it. Save your money for something that you're going to enjoy even more.
I will tell you, breaking up a run can be really satisfying or gratifying, because it's for almost every run of, let's say, 3 or more years, there's at least 1 year or one card that's not particularly desirable, not particularly attractive.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I recently, someone had offered to me the 2000 Essential Credentials of Guerrero that's out of 7. And I was like, oh, well, it's out of 7. And I'm like, but it looks like shit. I don't really want it. And I know that's very subjective and everything, but you're right. Like, there's a we have this sort of, a lot of us are completionists, in the sense that we like to have the full run of stuff. So there's that component of, it sounds like you've had that experience with the Nomar. Are there any other cards that you've kind of realized, I don't like this, or I don't love it enough to keep it for what the market values it at?
Yeah, it's also a very good question. I am a left brain thinker through and through. So when I face a question like that, my first thought is to create a spreadsheet. So I came up with like a whole scoring system. I actually used some of the attributes you guys had talked about when you were going through your Brett Favre pyramids. And I was like, what do I value? The brand, the aesthetics, the rarity, the condition, and just made a full list of what I thought Nomar's best cards were, and gave them a weighted average and picked out the top 25. And I'm like, okay, if I'm going to add more cards of Nomar, it needs to be from the top 25 of this list. That is personally catered to me. Like if I had mentioned the 99 Ultra Platinum Medallion, the purple, it's a great card. I just don't love the look of it. So I scored it pretty low on the aesthetics, and that dropped it down the list. Whereas if an unbiased third party was ranking these cards, they would have probably had it higher up on the list. So now I'm going through the process of grading the cards I want to keep for the PC, and then trying to find the cards that I want to part with. So we're going through that process now. And I'll let you know how it comes out on the other side.
Just as a quick aside, Brian, before you jump in, I agree with you. Like the Nomar 99, like I like the purple, but he's just standing there with a bat in his hands, right? Like versus the 98, which is like he's going backhanding a grounder. Like it's a completely different type of action shot. So I've encountered that too, where there's like a non-action shot. It's usually doesn't really do it for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If we're talking just about aesthetics and Nomar, I want to give Tommy Toploader a shout out. There's a 1-of-1 he has on Card Ladder Showcase from 1998 Score Rookie Traded Showcase, the artist proof 1-of-1s. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with those.
Yeah.
But I think those are hands down the nicest, well, maybe behind the 98 or 99 Gem Masters. They're the nicest 1-of-1 that the 90s produced, but they get no love. They get no recognition because they came out of Score, and it wasn't a Topps or a Fleer product.
And no one else used that. Well, there may be someone, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but that pattern was pretty unique. The wave pattern, right? It wasn't something that you saw in any of the big skybox designs or anything like that. So great looking card.
I kind of want to just go back a little bit to, I'll use the Rogers list as a reference, but I don't want to gloss over the fact that your site is not, when you list iconic cards, for example, there's a lot of information on here about the player, but you pull up Rogers and it's iconic cards, and somebody listening to this might just think like, oh, it's just looking at the most expensive, most valuable, like 1-of-1s and things like that. Like that's boring. I don't want to look through that. Like I know them, but I think people need to understand what iconic means. Is if you think of Barry Sanders, like the 1989 Score, okay, that's clearly not even close to his most expensive card or even his rarest, or to some people like collectible, right? But it's probably one of his, if not the most iconic card. Like you see that, it brings back all sorts of memories from, like, for me, like early 90s collecting Barry Sanders. Like people love that card, that set. Same thing here with like the Aaron Rodgers. I go through the list of the cards that you list, and you're very specific and careful on what you put on here. These are cards that, like, when you see them, it brings back something like, oh, I remember that card being released, or how popular that was, or it was like listed in Beckett as like the hottest card at the time. For example, like some would say it's, the 05, 06 Exquisite, the jersey patch auto, the on-card auto, it's the first year of Exquisite in football, but it's like the card built around the autograph. And then I scroll down more, and there's some like, niche cards on here, like the 05 Leaf Certified Materials card, which is a often overlooked card, Or the 05, 06 Ultimate Collection on card autograph, the horizontal. I used to have that card. It's a great card. But these are not like the most expensive of his cards or even the rarest, but they're iconic. And I like how you emphasize that fact as you scroll down. Then there's like a list of like some cards that you should know about or my favorite cards. And you have like a range of like a Kaboom on here, a 2018 Kaboom. You got the 05 Leaf Rookies and Stars, Gold Mirror Gold. Just you focus on really cool cards, specific cards, and then you have a really nice description on with each of these. And I just wanted to emphasize the fact that this is different than like, just something listing like the player's best cards or something like that. It's more of like to get people to see like the different types. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit and appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Brian. My intention is to cast a wide enough net where someone can have a crash course in a player's offerings without spending 2 years figuring it out. That means, like, if you're looking at Ken Griffey Jr., you got to hit on the 1989 Upper Deck, and you should probably hit on his 1998 PMG. Totally different stratosphere when it comes to value, but you can't tell the story of Ken Griffey Jr. cards without mentioning both of those. So it could be easier to stick to for Rogers, I'm just going to list out all his finest gold refractors or X-fractors. Like, those are really beautiful cards, but not everyone's going to want to collect that way, and not everyone has the budget to collect that way. Hopefully, as you explore those player profiles, you're getting a good feel for the low end, the mid end, and the high end. And you're learning enough about like what was offered during that era to go explore further. Maybe there's a set you really like the aesthetics of, but you don't like that particular card. Well, is there an insert auto that you could swap out? Like Ovechkin is a great example. His SP Authentic Future Watch, and this is true for most hockey cards. Behind the cup, your SP Authentic Future Watch auto is generally the most expensive, but it's numbered out of $9.99. Ultimate Collection has an on-card auto as well out of $2.99, and you can usually get it for like half the price. Do you want to collect a Future Watch auto for a reason, or do you actually like the aesthetics and the discounted price of the Ultimate Collection auto? Like, if you're coming in and you're just looking at the most expensive cards, you're not necessarily going to know that. So more to come on, like, as we add, or as I add more players to the website. I'm sure there's going to be more differences like that for collectors to explore.
Okay, so what I like about the player profiles is that you have this array of price points for collectors. So someone who's interested in Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be immediately turned off by having all these cards be priced too high and inaccessible. They may see an 05 Topps Black and say, oh, wow, that's something I can afford. A lot of newer collectors, especially in the 90s, have been messaging me in the recent past and asking about sort of this process of getting comfortable with moving into bigger cards and sort of where to start out and where that leads. But ultimately, like that first decision to maybe buy something that's whatever it is, $800 or $1,000 or something like that. So talk a little bit about the guide you wrote on that and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, sure. And I know you guys have purchased big cards recently, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts and opinions on this. But I think for a lot of us, this is a hobby. For a lot of us, it can also be an investment, whether it's intentional or not. And we don't need to get into the specifics of whether or not sports cards are assets or whether they're strong alternative assets. We'll just put that to the side and say that if you are spending 4, 5, or 6 figures on a card, that is a financial decision you're making. And we have this mental block that is meant to protect us from making bad financial decisions that are going to bite us in the ass down the line. So like before I answer this, just know that that mental block is there for a reason, and you don't need to feel guilty or less than because it exists. With that being said, once you buy your first $500 card, it gets easier to buy another $500 card. As you weigh it up to $1,000 card, if you purchase a couple $1,000 cards and you're using funding services and equity in the cards that you have to pay for it, then it starts to get easier too. I know when I hit a stretch where I picked up a couple big cards, and I struggled because I don't know that I had the conviction that I needed in order to make that decision with like the highest level of confidence. I got there and I convinced myself that the cards that I selected were the right cards to consolidate into. But that is super important, especially when you don't have a lot of cash on hand to buy a card and you're choosing to consolidate your collection into one card. There's no redos. You're going to get killed in fees if you take that card, put it to auction the next week, and then try to go out and buy a card of equivalent value. So I guess the two pieces of advice is like heed that mental block and recognize that it's there. And then when you're identifying the card that you really want to take a big swing at, like make sure it's the right card and go through the steps to identify what you value in cards so that you don't have regret the day after. Because there is a big hangover after you buy a big card. You don't really have the money to engage in the hobby the way you once did for a while. So yeah, that's how I would approach it. How about you guys?
Well, I think you hit a lot of good points that I follow. One thing I would add to that is that when you're buying, price is relative to whatever, and value is relative to whatever the person can afford. But let's just, be honest. If I'm buying like, so maybe like $15, $20 cards regularly, you can afford a lot more. And then when you do hit a card that's maybe $50 or something, you generally don't need to like consolidate into that, like sell all your, $10, $15, $20 cards. So it's like a little bit of a different mindset. That's more of like the way I look at it as like bulk collecting. And I used to do that a lot more, obviously, as a kid, but even, like I still buy cheap cards. I mean, I buy Brewers cards, so they're not expensive anyway, but it's just a different ball game when you're starting to get into those, like I'd say the threshold for me was probably, like you said, maybe like the $500 range. And then once it hit that point, it was always like looking like to the best cards that I could get of the player or team or whatever. And I think that's where like the lists start coming in, because when you start spending that much, it's like I have to start making a list to see, okay, like where am I going with this? And then it is an uncomfortable feeling when you're spending a significant amount of money in the thousands on cards. But the problem is, and what I would caution anybody to, and I'm in this point right now, and there's like no way to get out of it, is once you get into that like range, you start to feel more comfortable maybe not buying as many, but really the only thing that you kind of like look for are cards, not necessarily just because of value, but like cards at like that level technically, where you hit a threshold where like, okay, now I'm at this peak or this area where whatever, if you're collecting a player or team, you want to just like branch off in that area. And if you start buying, now the cheaper cards or whatever, the less rare ones, you start to just not really like them as much. So that's one thing I would caution people to, is like, it becomes more addicting in that area, and it can lead to financial problems, obviously. But the second thing is too, that everything, like, when you're like, for a player, for example, you really have to be careful and know like what you're collecting. And that's why I like how you brought that up, like know what you want to get. Just because like people say a card is this player's best card, it's the best one you can get, it's a ton of money, and you think, yeah, that's great, like I got to get that. But maybe in the back of your head, you're fighting it, like you don't really necessarily like the card that much, or maybe you would like the way other cards look better, but this one's the most expensive and everybody says the best. So then you go fund it and you'll get it, right? What tends to happen, and I've done this, where I thought like, oh, everybody says this is like the most significant card. I got to at least have this in my collection for this player. Otherwise, I'm not really that player collector, right? But then you get it and you realize I don't really like it. And that weighs on you more the more that you spend on a card. So when you start getting in that high value stuff, you can't just buy and say, well, I kind of like, I'll throw in the back of the shoebox and just buy something else. No, that's a significant portion of your, funds for the hobby. So it's just some cautionary tales. And that's what I've had to fight through over time as well, but I've worked through it and I'm not perfect with it, but.
One thing I think about for newer collectors that I would challenge them to do is when they maybe feel ready to try a big purchase, I would really maybe make it a challenge to yourself to try to pay for that card using only cards, assuming that you have, let's say let's say 10 $100 cards, and you want to buy an $800 card, and you think, okay, maybe I could sell these in bulk for $800, or I could price them out and do the work. At least in that position, you have sort of limited your out-of-pocket expense. Now, I know that we've got these 100 cards. So it's not truly limiting your out-of-pocket expense because it still is an $800 card. But in some ways, using cards to get cards is not a bad philosophy, because if you take that approach, ordinarily you're going to save some money in the long run. I would say also, like you both mentioned this in the essential credentials example and what Brian was just saying, but the 90s especially, well, no, really, any era, vintage 90s can be an echo chamber. Once you start refining or picking and choosing who you're following on Instagram to suit your collecting tastes, then it becomes, you see a lot of the similar cards over and over. And so there's this idea that, oh, wow, everybody collects this, therefore I should do it. For newer people to cards generally, I doubt there's a lot of ultra modern collectors that listen to us, but if they are, that's one area where I would not be comfortable spending thousands of dollars on some hot quarterback, etc. So be mindful of the genre which you're in. Like, don't go into vintage and necessarily spend $1,500 because it's an old card and you think it's good without doing your research. So there are a lot of pitfalls that newer collectors can make, but the consolidation process and the moving up the ladder can be pretty scintillating, because you're on this path to possibly getting a card that no one else has, or very few people have, and there's an exclusivity to that pursuit. There's something that we all find desirable in collecting rare cards, which is that there's that sort of like, I don't know, maybe like a primal competitive aspect that I've talked about before, where you want to have like the best PC of that player. So there's a lot of ways to approach it, but don't stretch yourself past what you can afford and what you're financially comfortable with, because Chris mentioned the hangover. Buying big cards can be pretty stressful, because now you don't want to be saddled with a $3,000 card that no one else would pay $3,000 for, and you don't really like it. So fight the tendency to maybe overpay. All right, so before we do a send-off here, this is a 90s Cards podcast. We talked a lot about the Smarter Collector, but Chris, before we let you go, we got to get your top 5 90s cards in your PC. Will you humor us with that?
Yeah, and you guys caught me at a time where I just sent a big bulk order out to PSA, so a lot of my Nomar cards are at PSA in their grading queue right now. I'm just going to shout out his 98 Essential Credentials. My favorite card is the 99 Star Ruby Spring Fling. Just like an amazing card. But for my top 5, I'm going to do top 5 that I have on me here today. So the first one, or coming in at number 5, is the 98 Upper Deck Retro Quantum Leap. This is numbered out of 50. Went back and forth on the next one, 1999 Topps Chrome Fortune 15 Refractor. This beat out the 98 Finest The Man Refractor, which is also numbered out of 75. This is out of 100. Number 3 is 97 Pinnacle Totally Certified Platinum Gold, numbered out of 30.
Peel on, huh?
Yes, peel on.
Did you know? Can I just mention something about the last one, the Fortune 15, Zan? That's the one with the gypsy ball. Remember from that other episode? I love that. I love that card.
Yeah. They don't make them like they used to. This is one of my newest cards. The 98 Donruss Crusade Red Nomar. Coming in at number 2, and then number 1 is not a Nomar card, but is my biggest pickup of 2024. Pedro 24 karat gold.
Beautiful. Fits right in on that 100-player PC.
Yes. Yeah. Front and center.
That's right. That's a hell of a collection, man. Please follow Chris at CardyC on CardyC Sports Cards on Instagram, and maybe he'll do an unboxing or reveal when those cards come back from PSA. So, Chris, we thanks so much for joining us and talking to us about the Smarter Collector. Everybody, go check him out on Instagram. Thanks, man. We hope to have you back on in the future.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks, Chris.